Good morning. Okay, so the internet is down at school, so today we're just going to whip through the 20th century music PowerPoint and just have a quick chat about 20th century music as a quick revision session. So first up, we've got some historical hooks. Now I'll let you just pause the video and just have a look through those in your own time, just to put 20th century music in a little bit of context, because obviously music is closely related to the current events of the time and the political events and the environmental events and whatever else happened, world wars and all the kind of things like that, have a big impact on the music at the time and what's popular and what's the current method of thinking. So it's important that you guys have a good kind of understanding of everything else that was going on at the time, just for a bit of context. Okay, so in the 20th century, the 1900s, many styles emerged. Some were very experimental. Now, the two styles that we need to focus on in 20th century music, there are a whole bunch of styles, but the two that we need to focus on are impressionist music and minimalist music. So impressionist music was the kind of first half of the 20th century. Minimalist music, I'm generalizing, but minimalist music was the second half, roughly. Impressionist music tended to be kind of blurry and hazy. And if you think about this leading on from romantic music was all about kind of expressing emotion and kind of experimenting with new techniques to make music more emotive. So, for example, big kind of dynamics changes, changing the tempo, making the tempo more flexible, using rubato, and the 20th century, the impressionist music, kind of carried on quite smoothly from that, making music slightly more blurry and hazy. The minimalist style was a detraction from that. The minimalist composers didn't want music to have this kind of this blurry texture, and they wanted to make it as simple and repetitive and almost mathematical as possible, to make it very kind of based on patterns. And this was repeated in the art world, same as all the other kind of musical styles and musical periods. The impressionist style was very similar in the art world, where you can see from this picture here that it's kind of very hazy, and the minimalist style was very ordered, very particular, based on patterns. So that links in quite well. So let's look at impressionist music first. Two of the famous composers that you guys need to know about are Claude Debussy and Maurice Ravel. So two very famous impressionist composers. So go check them out. Whole tone scale is the first concept that we need to look at. Now, if you think about all the white notes on the piano being C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then back to C. So seven notes, the first 7 letters of the alphabet, and then we start again. So you'll notice, if you look at this diagram on the left here, if you look at our piano keyboard, you'll notice that the gaps between some of the notes are actually different. So some of them have a black key in between and some of them don't. So the gaps from C to D has a black key in the middle, so that is said to be a whole tone. So C to C sharp would be the semitone, and C sharp to D would be another semitone. So C up to D is a whole tone. E to F, on the other hand, doesn't have a black key in between, so that is just a semitone. So E to F, even though they're both white notes, is just a semitone gap. A whole tone scale is just made up of whole tones. So when we go C to D and D to E, they're fine. That was fine to stick with the white notes because that's all whole tones. E to F is still a semitone, so when we get to E, we need to go up to F sharp, which makes it a whole tone, then up to G sharp, then up to A sharp, still sticking with the whole tones, and then instead of going from A sharp to B sharp, although to be fair, there isn't really a B sharp, so A sharp goes to C. So the whole tone scale sounds... So it has this kind of mysterious, dreamy sound about it, which makes it kind of in keeping with the impressionist style and their method of thinking. So that's what it looks like on the keyboard. On the left and on the right, you can see what it looks like written out as a scale. Next up, we've got atonal music. So we quite often say when we're talking about tonality, oh, it's going to be either major or minor. Now, up until this point in musical history, music was generally either major or minor. The only exception to that is back in the Renaissance, when it was very common for music to be modal. So, but up until this point, the main kind of areas are either major or minor. Major being generalized as slightly happier and brighter, minor being generalized as slightly sadder and darker. The exception to that now that we've started the 20th century, is atonal music. So some composers in the 20th century felt that tonal music, is in major or minor, was too limiting. They decided to write music that was neither major or minor, experimenting with atonal music. So it doesn't have a tonal center. It doesn't have a key. So it's not G major or A minor or any of the other keys. It doesn't have that. There is no sense of key. There's lots of discords, which means we've got clashing notes. Because we don't have a diatonic key, we don't know what notes fit together nicely, and therefore you've got all notes available to you. All of your 12 notes that you could choose on the keyboard, or any of them are available to you, and so some of them are going to clash quite harshly. There's wide intervals or leaps as well, which characterize the music. One of the most famous atonal composers was Arnold Schoenberg. Now, he came up with a really, really interesting system for writing atonal music called the 12-tone row. So this was a system that used of our available 12 keys on the piano, so the black and the white ones. So before you get up to the next octave, you've got 12 different keys to choose from. He came up with a system that was using all of these different ones. So it was kind of a mathematical system, I guess, that was using all of these different notes, and they were all included in a particular way. And he would use that system to influence and write his music. So this is a bit of Arnold Schoenberg. Another feature of 20th century music was cluster chords. So cluster chords are groups of notes that are next to one another. They're all played at the same time, same as a normal chord, effectively. But we're using all the notes that are literally next to each other. They're really, really, really close. You can see from the picture on the slide there that the piano player is just smooshing down all those notes with their left hand. So this produces a big kind of clash. It's not really surprising when you've got lots of notes that are that close together. There's no room for the harmony to kind of breathe and open. So it all becomes very close and very produces a lot of dissonance in the harmony. So the technique can be either used by pressing the whole hand against the keys, or sometimes even the forearm. So it's a very interesting effect. Okay, on to minimalist music then. So minimalist, as we've already said, came away from the impressionist style and wanted very clean lines. It wanted to be very efficient. It was all kind of based on patterns and repetition. And this was mirrored throughout the architectural world, the art world, as well as the music world. So features of minimalist music: we've got simple melodic and rhythmic figures, repeated many, many, many times that change gradually over the course of the piece. And sometimes the pieces would be very long. You'd have pieces that would last 45 minutes. Sometimes they'd be hours. Whole pieces are based on short repeated patterns. So they're all based on these little nuggets, these little, what's the word I'm thinking of? Can't remember. These little nuggets of notes. Cell, that's the one. These little cells. Bit of background, it developed in the second half of the 20th century, as we've said, and it was partly as a reaction against atonal music and the kind of seeming lack of order there. It was kind of trying to put the order. It was partly as a reaction to atonal music, to try and make it more ordered and structured and regular. An example of a minimalist composer is Terry Riley, this guy here with the fantastic beard. This piece, which you're about to listen to, is called In C. There's many, many, many short musical phrases. You'll see in the video they've got the little phrases all marked out. They're repeated many, many, many times. So this piece can last, I think it varies actually. It's not always the same length. Sometimes it can be 45 minutes. Sometimes it can be over an hour. There's different melodies and rhythms are kind of overlaid with each other, and they're all kind of gradually changing and evolving over time. One of the techniques when you're getting those rhythms layered over the top of each other to produce different rhythms is known as cross rhythms. So here's the video. Let's take a closer look at some cross rhythms now. So when different musical rhythms are layered together, a cross rhythm is when different musical rhythms are layered together to make a more complex rhythm. So you might take something that's quite simple, layer it together with a couple of other different things, and all of a sudden you've got quite a complicated rhythm. An example is Steve Reich's clapping music. So I'll play you a bit from the video so that you can hear it. You probably will have been over this one in class, so you should recognize it. But for this one, you've got one rhythm played by one person and then the same rhythm played by a second person, and then gradually the second person moves their rhythm one step to either the right or the left. And this is a technique known as phase shifting. So phase shifting one step each time you've completed a cycle of 8 repetitions. So you play the rhythm 8 times and then you'd shuffle it one step to the left. And of course the initial one stays the same. So you've got this effect of kind of bringing them out of phase with each other, and it creates a really interesting effect. And every time the bottom one shifts, it's another polyrhythm. So it's a really interesting technique. Other examples of cross rhythms. So if you look at the pictures here, we've got 3 against 2. So in the first picture here, you've got 2 notes at the top, so the dotted crotchets with 3 ordinary crotchets underneath, which produces kind of like a triplety sort of effect. So what would that be? So if I do stamps with stamps that are the dotted crotchets that are the 2, and then claps which are the 3. So it'd be 1, 2, 1, 2. Like that, and a similar kind of thing when you've got in the second picture when you've got all the triplets and then the semiquavers underneath. So that's going to be 4 against 3. So again, producing rhythms that are going to be slightly clashing together, and it's going to produce an interesting polyrhythm or a cross rhythm. And then the last example of cross rhythms is where you've got a 4/4 time signature, let's say a regular time signature, and you use your accents, which are the little kind of crocodile things above, to make it sound like it's in a different time signature, or to imply that it's in a slightly different time signature. So for example, the first one, so standard 4/4, you're accenting every other quaver. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then in the Latin one, so this is like a kind of a Cuban or Afro-Cuban son kind of beat. So it's 1. So it's kind of taking those notes and grouping them in groups of threes and then the two at the end. So it's kind of implying a different time signature. Here's clapping music by Steve Reich. Another famous composer, one of the very prominent ones in the minimalist genre, is Philip Glass. So this is one of his pieces. He's done a little bit more film music and stuff, so you can kind of hear that some of his pieces are slightly more melodic. You've got simple melodic and harmonic ideas, lots of repetition, obviously, and then you've got the cross rhythms forming as well. So this is a really kind of common theme throughout minimalist music.